Cold wind pushed across the command post near Verdun. Maps covered an entire wall, connected by thin strings tracing German movements from the Ardennes. Field phones buzzed every few minutes. Officers moved between tables with clipped steps, carrying fresh reports from the front. Outside, truck engines idled. Mud slid under boots. A faint rumble rolled from the distant northeast, fading in and out under the winter air. The Battle of the Bulge had begun, and few understood how deep the German push already was. Eisenhower stood near the center table, leaning forward, one hand flat on the edge of the map. His uniform caught the white glow of a single hanging lamp. He read the latest dispatch without speaking. A door opened. The cold rushed in for a second. Patton entered with his usual stride, removing his gloves one finger at a time. His helmet strap tapped lightly against his jacket. He paused only long enough to look around the room, scanning the tense faces of the staff officers, then moved toward Eisenhower. Eisenhower raised his eyes. Patton stopped at the table. "George," Eisenhower said. "Sir." Eisenhower pointed at the marked area around Bastogne. "They're moving faster than expected. Milton's corps is folding back. We need a counterblow before this becomes a breakthrough." Patton studied the map without blinking. His breath came out as a short cloud. He touched one of the strings connecting the German positions. "They're overextended." Eisenhower looked at him, waiting. Patton kept his eyes on the map. "If you want a Third Army to turn north, I'll give you 3 divisions inside 48 hours. The room went silent. A pencil dropped somewhere near the message table. Eisenhower straightened slowly. 3 divisions? Yes. In 48 hours? Yes. Eisenhower's staff exchanged brief glances, but Patton ignored them. He picked up a pencil and traced a line from his current position near Saarlautern up toward Luxembourg and Belgium. Snow had been falling steadily over the past days. Roads were narrow, twisting, and crowded with retreating units. Bridges were weak. Fuel transport was uncertain. Every officer in the room knew this. Eisenhower narrowed his eyes, studying Patton's path. "Your army is engaged on 2 fronts. Moving that amount of armor so fast, you'll have to pivot your entire command." Patton placed the pencil down. "I've already issued preliminary alerts. My staff has marching orders ready. 1 phone call and they begin." Eisenhower looked at him for a moment, saying nothing. Across the room, the large field phone rang. No one moved to answer it at first. Then an officer grabbed the receiver, listened, and hung up. "New report from 8 Corps," he said. "They're losing control of the roads. Refugees mix with armored elements. Visibility is low." Another officer added, "The Germans are using captured American equipment. Hard to tell who is who." Eisenhower turned back to Patton. "This is not a normal maneuver, George. You're talking about reversing an entire army in the middle of combat while winter closes every road." "I know what it is," Patton said. A gust of wind rattled the loose metal sheet outside. The lamp above the table swayed once. Eisenhower walked to the far end of the map. "Show me how you intend to enter Belgium. Show me the timing. And show me what you'll do if the roads choke." Patton followed him, dragging the map weights a few centimeters as he spread the northern sector wider. "My lead unit moves at dawn tomorrow. Infantry clears road intersections. Engineers follow with plows and explosives for block routes. Armor moves behind them." He tapped 3 points along the route. "We rotate columns every 8 hours. No long halts." "And fuel?" Eisenhower asked. "I'm pulling from Metz depots. If there's any delay, tanks switch to reserve rations until the convoys catch up." Eisenhower crossed his arms. "And if the Germans cut your supply corridor?" Patton looked directly at him. "Then we cut theirs first." Another officer walked toward Eisenhower with a fresh dispatch. "Sir, Bastogne is surrounded on 3 sides." Eisenhower studied the message. He set it aside. Patton said, "Give me the order." Snow began to fall again, tapping against the thin window panes. A jeep halted outside, its brakes squealing. 2 soldiers dragged a crate of new radio parts, sat down, and hurried back into the storm. Eisenhower moved to the window for a moment and watched the snow swirl over the headlights. Then he looked back at Patton. 3 divisions in 48 hours, he repeated. That's right. Eisenhower walked around the table, stopping directly across from him. If you fail, they cut the front in half. Patton didn't move. If you succeed, Eisenhower continued, you break their momentum. Patton waited. Eisenhower's staff watched the two men in silence. Eisenhower finally exhaled. All right, I want your written plan within the hour. Patton nodded once, firm and quick. Eisenhower added, and I want regular updates. Every roadblock, every change of direction. No improvisation without notice. Patton put his gloves back on. You'll have every update. He turned to leave. Eisenhower stopped him with a quiet call. George. Patton looked back. You understand what you're committing to. Sir, Patton said, I've been waiting for this chance since they started the attack. For a moment, Eisenhower held his gaze. Then he gave a short nod. Patton walked out, boots echoing down the wooden hallway, fading under the rising wind outside. Inside the command post, Eisenhower looked again at the thin line cutting across the snow-covered Ardennes. Officers returned to their stations. Radios crackled. The lamp over the map swayed once more. Eisenhower reached for the telephone. Get me Patton's chief of staff, he said. Immediately, the cold continued pressing against the windows as the first decisive movement of the counteroffensive began to form. Night settled over the Third Army headquarters as trucks rolled into formation. Headlights cut thin lines through the falling snow. Engines warmed in long rows, each vehicle shaking slightly with the vibration of cold metal coming alive. Inside a dimly lit operations tent, Patton stood alongside his staff. A large map lay pinned to a plywood board, weighted at the corners with spare ammunition boxes. Officers gathered around it as runners carried in the latest reports from the advancing German spearheads. Patton held a cup of black coffee, untouched. He watched Colonel Muller place a new marker near Bastogne. Encirclement is tightening, Muller said. Air support is grounded. Weather hasn't lifted. Patton's jaw tightened. How far are the lead columns? Advance elements are moving to the Saar region, another officer said. Snow's slowing them. Roads are freezing. Patton tapped the board with 2 fingers. Pushed them harder. General Gay stepped closer. We're moving fast, but not fast enough to outrun the bottlenecks. Some units are getting stuck behind abandoned vehicles. Patton leaned over the map. Open alternate routes. Use whatever is clear. Gay pointed at the narrow roads twisting through the hills. Those paths weren't built for armor. They're barely wide enough for trucks. Make them wide enough, Patton said. Outside, a whistle blew. Soldiers formed columns, tightening their straps, checking rifles, adjusting helmets. Snow clung to their coats as they moved into positions beside the armored lines. Patton stepped out of the tent and watched the preparations. The hum of engines spread across the field. A mechanic crawled under a stalled Sherman and hit the side panel with a wrench until the engine coughed to life. A driver approached Patton, saluting. Sir, division engineers report collapsed bridge on Route Blue. Which span? The one near the river bend before Luxembourg. Patton turned to Gay. Reroute the armor. Engineers blast through the hillside. Cut a new path if needed. The driver ran back toward the trucks. Another officer rushed from the communications tent. Message from SHAF, sir. Eisenhower wants your status on the first wave. Patton took the slip, read it, folded it once, and handed it back. Tell him we're moving on schedule. The officer hesitated. Sir, visibility is falling. If this keeps up... Patton interrupted. We move. No delays. He walked forward, passing between tanks coated in frost. A crew was struggling to crank a frozen turret. Patton stopped beside them. Problem? He asked. Turret rings ice, sir. Patton slapped the metal with his gloved hand. Heat it. Fire the engine. Keep it turning until it moves. The gunner nodded and jumped back inside. The column commander approached. Sir, if the blizzard worsens, half these machines won't reach the Luxembourg line by dawn. Patton faced him. They will reach it. The commander held his breath, then saluted and returned to his unit. Patton climbed onto the front step of a jeep. Soldiers nearby turned toward him. Orders, Patton said. His voice cut through the snow. "We move north at full speed. Don't wait for perfect roads. Clear your own. If a vehicle blocks your path, push it aside. If a bridge is gone, build another. No pauses. Not one." The men nodded. Some pulled scarves tighter over their faces. Others adjusted their rifles. Patton pointed toward the dark horizon. "Somewhere up there, an entire division is holding because they believe we're coming. Let's not disappoint them." Engines roared in response. The line shifted, preparing to roll. A signal officer ran toward him again. General Eisenhower's on direct line. Patton followed him into the radio tent. Static crackled through the handset. Eisenhower's voice came through. "George, status." "Columns are on the move," Patton said. "You'll hit heavy traffic on the southern routes." "I know. And the weather reports say the snow is worsening near the Luxembourg border." "I know." A short pause. "Can you still make Bastogne?" Eisenhower asked. "Yes." Another pause. "You sound certain." "I am." Rustling papers echoed faintly on Eisenhower's end. "Reports say German armor is pushing west faster than predicted. If they reach the Meuse bridges before we counter, the front fractures. Then we counter before they reach them. Your flanks will be exposed during the pivot. They won't stay exposed." Eisenhower exhaled. "I'll trust your timetable, but keep me informed every hour. You'll have the updates." The line clicked off. Patton left the tent and walked toward the lead vehicles. Snow fell in thick sheets, covering helmets and windshields. Tank crews scraped the glass with bayonets. Drivers huddled near engines for warmth before climbing inside. A signal jeep rolled up with fresh reports. An officer jumped out. "Sir, German paratroopers spotted near key crossroads. Could interfere with our route." Patton read the report quickly. "Tell the infantry to sweep both sides of the road. No halt unless absolutely necessary." Another runner arrived. "Sir, radio intercepts suggest they're preparing to hit Bastogne from the east with armor." Patton folded the paper. All the more reason to reach them first. He walked to the front of the long armored column. The first Sherman idled, exhaust rising in a thin plume. The commander saluted from the open hatch. Patton climbed onto the jeep beside him. "Move out." A horn signaled. Engines growled. Tracks bit into the frozen mud. The massive column began rolling north, headlights forming a long line stretching into the dark hills. As they advanced, snow thickened until the world shrank to a narrow white corridor. Trucks slid, regained traction, and pushed forward. Infantry marched along the edges of the road, leaning into the wind. At a tight bend, a stalled truck blocked half the lane. Patton signaled. Engineers rushed forward with axes and chains. The truck was dragged aside in minutes. Further ahead, a narrow bridge sagged under the weight of ice. Patton ordered reduced spacing. Tanks crossed one by one while engineers reinforced beams. Radio static filled the air. Messages cut in and out. German patrols spotted. Road ahead blocked. Visibility 0. Patton answered each one with the same order: "Keep moving." Hours passed. Dawn faintly colored the horizon behind heavy clouds. The world stayed cold, silent, and white except for the grinding of engines and the distant thump of artillery. The column continued north. Patton remained in the lead jeep, eyes fixed on the road. Behind him stretched miles of armor, infantry, engineers, fuel trucks, and supply vehicles, all pushing through winter toward besieged town waiting in the dark. The movement had begun, and stopping was no longer an option. Snow thinned as dawn grew pale over the horizon. The lead column reached a ridge overlooking a frozen valley. Tanks and trucks spread below on a narrow road cutting through groves of bare trees. Frost coated the branches. Silence hung heavy. Patton stood on the jeep's running board, binoculars raised. He scanned the road. On the far end, a small convoy of enemy trucks moved slowly, dust trailing behind. Their silhouettes blurred in the morning light. He dropped the binoculars. "Infantry," he called to the nearby captain. The captain saluted and jogged toward a half-track. Patton climbed back down. He waited. Minutes passed. A whistle, single, sharp across the field. Infantry units emerged from cover among the trees, rifles ready. They advanced downhill toward the convoy. In the command tent, the radio crackled. A signal officer listened, then leaned toward Patton. "Sir, tank platoon reports heavy fire near the bridge at Luxembourg Crossroads." Patton nodded toward the ridge. "Hold position. Wait for my order." He bent over the map, laid on the hood of the Jeep. He traced the path of the enemy convoy. "Give me a tracking feed," he said, and dispatched the recon jeeps to flank from the east. 2 officers sprinted toward radio jeeps parked nearby. Patton turned to the colonel beside him. "If they try to escape, cut off their retreat. Don't let them reach the town." The colonel saluted. Snow drifted slowly. The convoy below slowed further. Dust rose. Then rifles cracked. Gunfire echoed through the valley. The convoy halted. Infantry shapes moved among the trees. Shadows darted. 2 armored cars rolled toward the convoy. Their machine guns barked. Black smoke rose from one of the enemy trucks. Patton watched without flinching. Moments later, the convoy broke apart. Trucks scattered. Some tried to reverse. Others abandoned engines and ran. The infantry closed in. The armored cars moved too fast. Corners of the convoy got boxed in. Suddenly, from the trees on the far side, a burst of rifle fire. One armored car jerked. Soldiers hit the ground. The second car returned fire. Shell fragments kicked up snow. A truck exploded, sending a flame and sending a shockwave across the valley. Patton's jaw clenched. He moved his hand over the map. "We go now," he said flatly. He climbed into the Jeep, turned the key. Engine started with a growl. He signaled to platoon leaders. Tanks rolled forward, crosswise across the ridge, blocking escape routes. The armored cars charged downhill. Infantry followed. The valley erupted. Machine guns, rifle fire, cries. From the ridge, the German armor was trapped. Smoke and flame rose, blending with the pale sky. Frozen mud splattered over snow, black and red. Patton remained in the lead Jeep. He did not speak. Minutes later, the firing stopped. Silence took over. Heavy, wounded. An officer from the armored car scrambled toward Patton. "Sir, the convoy is destroyed. Enemies scattered. No sign of organized resistance." Patton nodded once. He looked down at the valley, at overturned trucks, smoldering wrecks, abandoned weapons' bodies. Some lying still, others huddled wounded. Turret hatches open. Helmets on the snow. Gas canisters leaking. He turned away. Gloved hand touched the radio phone. "Report to ADF," he said. "Area secure. Ambush successful." He ended the call. Rain of snow resumed. In the command tent, officers stared at the map, then at each other. A young lieutenant stepped forward. "Sir, this will slow enemy movement toward the Meuse significantly." Patton looked at him. "Not just slow. They'll reroute. That buys us hours." He stared at the valley one more time. Then, without a word, walked back to the Jeep. He raised his hand to a signal officer. "Send word to Eisenhower. Columns stay on schedule. Maintain formation. Prepare to cross into Belgium by dusk." The officer nodded, ran off. Patton climbed aboard. The engine roared. The column began to roll again. Tanks, half-tracks, fuel trucks, supply convoys, all pushing forward, lines reforming, moving north. Snow fell thicker now. Wind rose in gusts. The ridge disappeared behind swirling white. The valley, silent and scarred, lay below. Hours later, twilight crept in. The lead column reached a narrow road carved through craggy hills. The path descended into a gorge. Trees crowded around. Snow masked the edges. A scout jeep skidded to a halt ahead. The driver jumped out, exhausted. He saluted. "Sir, heavy obstacles." Trees felled across the path. Road blocked. Patton shut off the engine. He climbed down, walked to the front of the column. Snow muffled footsteps. He crouched, hands sifting fragile snow away from broken branches and debris. Others followed. Men used axes and saws. Fuel trucks idled. Lights glowed inside coal cabins. Engineers worked in silence, breath visible. A half-track passed slowly, its treads tearing fresh ruts. Another collided with a thick branch. The impact trembled. Men cursed under their breath. Patton wiped snow from his brow. He looked ahead into darkness thick with fog. The blocked road stretched on, the only route into Belgium for miles. He stood upright, raised his voice once. Clear it. Pause. Then roll forward. Axes rang, chains rattled. Trees cracked. Timber fell. Branches scraped metal. The convoy clogged. Tanks waited. Gas trucks idled. The wind carried with splinters and stale smoke. It took hours. Exhaustion spread. Men slowed. A lieutenant looked at Patton. "Sir, if we keep this pace, we lose momentum before we even cross the border." Patton glanced at him. "We don't stop. Not now. Not until Bastogne is relieved." He turned and walked among the waiting vehicles. Hoses hissed from the fuel trucks as men warmed engines. A cook near a supply tent handed out mugs of hot soup. Steam rose into the cold air. Snow blanketed the top of the convoy. Headlights cut soft halos in the white. The road, once blocked by trees, was open, narrow, winding, still dangerous. The column moved again, slow, grinding forward. Patton climbed back in the Jeep. Headlights ahead flickered. Tanks lurched. Tracks carved deep grooves. Rain of snow turned into sleet. The lead Jeep's radio crackled. "Sir," message from SHEF. "Eisenhower says, proceed with utmost care. You carry the hopes of the entire front." The voice paused. "He wants confirmation when you cross into Belgium." Patton shut off the radio. He stared into the gloom ahead, headlights fading in the white blur. He exhaled. "Then we cross." Night fell fast over the Ardennes. Clouds hung low, hiding the moon. The Third Army's column pushed through the final stretch toward Belgium, engines muffled under blankets of snow. Headlights cast weak paths through the darkness. Patton rode in the lead Jeep, shoulders squared, eyes fixed ahead. The radio hissed with bursts of static. A faint glow appeared above the ridge in the distance. Artillery flashes, low and steady. The driver spoke without turning. "Sir, that's Bastogne." Patton didn't answer. A scout Jeep approached from the left, sliding slightly before stopping. The scout officer stepped out. "Road ahead is thick with retreating units," he said. "Mixed groups. Some Americans, some Belgian civilians. Hard to pass." Patton stepped out of the Jeep. "Show me." The scout led him toward the crest. Wind whipped across the ridge. Below, hundreds of figures moved along the road. Some limped, some carried small bundles. A few waved weakly at the approaching column. Behind them, artillery lit the sky again. Patton watched the movement for several seconds. Open a side path. Move the civilians and the wounded first. "Sir, the slopes are steep," the scout said. "Risky. Do it anyway." Men rushed to carve an alternate route. Engineers dug into snow and frozen soil. Others guided the civilians. Soldiers helped the wounded up the slope. A Jeep's headlights illuminated a medic supporting a man whose coat was torn open, blood spreading across the cloth. Patton stood motionless, taking in the scene. A distant explosion shook the ground. Another flash lit the clouds. A runner slid down the slope toward him. "Sir, German armor on the east side of the ridge. They're moving fast. Might cut our line." Patton's jaw set. He signaled the tank commander. "Bring the Shermans forward. Hold that ridge." The commander sprinted off. Engines roared. Tanks rolled into position, lining up along the crest. Their turrets turned east. Patton returned to his Jeep, pulled the map onto his knees. The driver watched him from the corner of his eye. "Sir, what if they get here first?" Patton answered quietly. "They won't." The radio crackled again. 3rd Battalion, reporting enemy movement near the forest road. Infantry with armored support. Patton spoke into the receiver. "Hold your line. Reinforcements coming." He waved to a column of half-tracks. "Move. Support the east flank." Snow began to fall harder, covering tracks almost as soon as they formed. A tank crewman ran toward Patton, boots slipping. "General, visibility almost gone." Spotters can't see more than 20 yards. Patton looked at the dark ridge. Then fire by sound. Cut off anything that tries to climb. Minutes later, the first burst of machine gun fire echoed across the valley. Muzzles flashed in the white haze. The Shermans joined in, their cannons shaking the frozen air. The glare illuminated silhouettes of trees and fleeting shadows. Enemy rounds struck the ridge. Men ducked. Snow sprayed into the air. Patton stood by the jeep, watching the east horizon. Light flickered across his face with every blast. Radio reports collided. Enemy probing the line. Multiple armored units. Requesting anti-tank guns. Patton gave orders one after another. Shift the line 20 meters north. Bring up the engineers with explosives. Infantry forward 2 ranks. The battle ignited across the ridge. The sound rolled like waves, rising and falling. Explosions cut through patches of fog. Tank treads crunch into frozen earth. A lieutenant rushed up. "Sir, civilians are safe. Path is clear." Patton nodded. "Good. Move the column. Tanks first." Supply trucks split into 2 lanes. He climbed back into the jeep, motioning the driver to advance. The jeep rolled forward, weaving between halted troops and tanks spitting fire into the darkness. A burning truck illuminated the road for a moment before collapsing into embers. As the column advanced, the faint outline of Bastone's outskirts appeared beyond the forest. Faint rumbling shook the air. The sound of shelling grew louder. Patton leaned forward. "Push faster." The road narrowed again near a stone bridge. Snow piled high on the sides. A tank attempted to cross, slipped, corrected itself, and continued. The bridge creaked under the weight. A runner arrived, breathless. "Sir, radio intercepts confirm German armor forming on the west. They may try to squeeze the corridor." Patton answered without hesitation. "Open fire the moment they show themselves." The runner nodded and ran back. Halfway across the bridge, the column was hit by sudden flashes from the left. Enemy artillery. Shells landed near the road, throwing mud and snow into the air. Men hit the ground. Vehicles jolted. A jeep overturned, sliding down the embankment. Patton stood on the jeep step, gripping the rail. "Don't stop. Get across." The tanks accelerated. Trucks lurched forward, slipping but regaining control. Infantry rushed along the sides. Another shell landed closer. Shrapnel clattered against metal. A nearby half-track caught fire. Soldiers dragged wounded men away from the flames. Patton pointed forward. "Keep going. We're almost through." The final tank rolled off the bridge just as a shell struck the far edge, blowing chunks of stone into the river. The bridge groaned but held. The column cleared the crossing. Patton signaled to halt briefly. He climbed out again and walked toward the highest point of the clearing. The horizon glowed orange. Bastogne lay somewhere beyond that glow. A radio jeep pulled up beside him. The operator leaned out. "General, message from SATF." Patton took the receiver. Eisenhower's voice came through, steady despite the static. "George, reports of heavy fire near your route. Status." Patton spoke carefully. "We broke through the ridge. On approach to Bastogne. German attempts to cut the line failed." A pause. "I'm receiving reports of civilians rescued from the corridor," Eisenhower said. Patton looked at the long line of soldiers now reforming behind him. "Yes." Another pause. "The men are watching you. The entire front is watching you." Patton looked at the glow in the distance. "They'll see us in Bastogne." He handed the receiver back. The column moved again, through the forest, through drifts of untouched snow, through winding dark paths lit only by scattered flames and tank lights. At the last ridge before the town, the artillery flashes became constant. The sky pulsed with distant fire. The sound of small arms rattled through the trees. A soldier near the front whispered, "They're still holding." Another answered, "They'd better be." Patton climbed onto a Sherman's side. He looked ahead at the faint outline of the town under siege. Then he raised his arm. "Forward." The tank commander saluted, shouted the order, and engines roared as the Third Army charged toward Bastogne. the entire line moving as one, the sound of treads and boots shaking the frozen ground. Behind them, scattered civilians watching the tree line, snow falling over their faces. Some lifted their hands weakly, others touched their hats. A few simply stared. Word traveled through them in soft voices. They came. Dawn broke over Bastogne in a thin gray line. Smoke drifted from shattered rooftops. Frozen streets wound between buildings struck by shells, their walls cracked and blackened. The distant echo of sporadic gunfire rose and fell through the cold air. The Third Army's forward scouts reached the outskirts first. They moved carefully between wrecked vehicles, checking corners, listening for movement. A scout waved his arm. Friendly lines ahead. Patton's jeep rolled up moments later. He stepped out and stood still, taking in the town. The smoke, the broken windows, the quiet figures leaning against rubble. A medic hurried past, carrying bandages. Somewhere deeper inside the town, a tank fired a single shell, followed by silence. Two paratroopers emerged from behind a collapsed balcony. One limped, the other supported him with a shoulder under his arm. Both stared at the approaching armored column. The limping soldier spoke first. "Sir, you actually made it." Patton nodded. "Where's your commanding officer?" The soldier pointed toward the church tower, rising above the shattered houses. Bells lay silent, the stone chipped and soot-stained. Patton walked toward it. Tanks idled behind him. Infantry followed, keeping their distance. Inside the square near the church, a group of officers from the 101st Airborne stood around a map placed on a wooden crate. One of them turned as Patton approached. "General," he said, "we held, but barely." Patton glanced at the map. "You'll hold better now." An officer stepped forward. "They hit us from every side. Supplies gone. Ammo low. We thought the line was finished." Patton looked at him. "Not today." A dull blast sounded somewhere east. The officers turned their heads. Patton didn't move. "How many wounded?" he asked. The nearest officer motioned to the makeshift hospital inside the church. "Hundreds." Patton walked toward the church. The wooden doors were partly blown off. Inside, cots filled the aisles. Medics worked quietly. Lanterns cast soft circles of light on stone walls. A chaplain stood near the altar, speaking to a soldier with a bandaged head. Patton walked past them, observing each cot. Some soldiers opened their eyes briefly. Some stared at the ceiling. Others slept under blankets pulled to their chins. A young medic approached. "General, we didn't think anyone could reach us through that weather." Patton answered calmly. "Weather doesn't stop an army. Not this one." He stepped back outside. Snow drifted from the rooftops as a breeze picked up. The sound of engines grew louder as more Third Army convoys rolled into the town. Fuel trucks parked beside damaged buildings. Engineers unloaded equipment. Infantry gathered near intersections, forming fresh lines. A lieutenant approached. "Sir, Eisenhower on standby through field radio. He's waiting for your confirmation." Patton walked to the radio jeep. The operator handed him the receiver. "George," Eisenhower's voice crackled. "Status?" Patton looked at the street ahead as he spoke. Bastogne relieved. Third Army fully inside the perimeter. Static hummed for a moment. "Well done," Eisenhower said. "The men will remember this." Patton didn't respond immediately. He watched as a group of paratroopers walked past the jeep, their uniforms torn, their faces pale. One of them raised his hand in silent acknowledgement. "When can you restore full supply routes?" Eisenhower asked. "Before nightfall," Patton said. "Engineers are opening paths. Armor sets a new defensive ring. We'll stabilize the corridor." "Good," Eisenhower replied. "The front needed this." Patton lowered the receiver, but didn't hand it back yet. Eisenhower's voice returned, softer. "This move, it will spread across every division by morning. They'll talk about it for a long time." Patton looked at the ruined church, the cots inside, the tanks forming a protective wall around the square. "They'll talk about the men in the town," he said, "not the road that led here." He hung up the receiver. The radio operator saluted. Patton walked toward the center of the square again. Snow continued to fall. Soldiers gathered around him. Airborne infantry, tank crews, engineers. None spoke loudly. Some simply watched the arriving convoys as if unsure whether they were real. A paratrooper carrying a broken rifle asked quietly, "Sir, is it true you moved 3 divisions in 48 hours?" Patton stopped. "We moved because you were still here." The paratrooper lowered his head. Voices spread through the streets. Men calling others names. Engineers shouting instructions. A cook handing hot soup to a soldier who had no gloves. Medical teams guiding wounded to trucks. Tanks taking new positions at the edge of the town. Patton stepped onto a pile of rubble and looked over Bastogne. Columns of smoke rose straight into the morning sky. The sun pushed through the clouds, pale and weak. Snow sparkled along rooftops and craters. He watched silently. A jeep pulled up behind him. General Gay stepped out. "Sir, supply reinforcements are 30 minutes out. Air support expected once the weather clears." Patton nodded. Gay hesitated. "The men, they're saying the relief will change the course of the whole front." Patton didn't turn. "The course changes because they didn't break." He looked back toward the men gathering around the wrecked vehicles, sharing blankets, sharing canteens, sharing space after days of isolation. Gay lowered his voice. "The entire army saw what you did. Patton finally stepped down from the rubble. They'll see what the men did." He walked toward the outskirts, where the Third Army continued to pour into the town. Soldiers stepped aside as he passed. Some saluted. Some simply watched. Near the last row of tanks, a young private stopped him. "General, what happens now?" Patton looked toward the horizon, where the front line stretched far beyond the white forest. "Now," he said, "we finished the job." The private nodded slowly. Patton climbed into his jeep. The engine rumbled. Snowflakes slid across the hood. He looked once more at Bastogne. The shell-torn buildings, the lines of wounded being carried out, the exhausted defenders leaning on their rifles, and the massive force now filling the streets. The jeep moved forward. Behind him, the column kept arriving, filling every road and alley, engines echoing against broken walls. Above the rooftops, smoke thinned and drifted away, and in the silence that followed, whispered voices passed among the survivors. They came. The jeep turned the corner, disappearing into the moving line of the Third Army as Bastogne returned, slowly, to breath.